Welcome to the Feminist Park podcast. I'm Kwame.
And I'm Leilani. It's great to be kicking off this journey with you all today.
Yeah, we're diving into work that's really closely tied to the vision behind the Feminist Park project.
Imagining these truly equitable public spaces, starting with the idea for an intersectional feminist park right here in Berlin.
Exactly. And this podcast, well, it's kind of an extension of that. We're going to be digging into the academic research that, supports and informs that kind of vision.
We'll be taking these dense, sometimes quite academic papers and really pulling out the core and insights.
And looking at them through specific lenses, things like environmental justice, intersectionality, anti-colonial thought, queer theory.
All the stuff that helps us think critically about space. Okay, so let's unpack this. If you look closely at the benches in your local park, or
Right.
The layout of the streetlights downtown,
Right.
or even just like the exact placement of the steps leading up to your city hall,
Yeah.
you aren't just looking at architecture. You're actually looking at, well, an invisible border wall.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Think about the feeling of the pavement under your feet,
Mm.
or the sight lines when the sun goes down, or just the physical distance between like a bus stop and a grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I want you to ask yourself a question that might actually fundamentally change how you view your own neighborhood.
It definitely changed mine.
Right. So ask yourself, who was this space actually built for? I mean, who is it really built for?
To feel safe.
Exactly. Who feels perfectly safe lingering there after dark? And on the flip side, who is being subtly or maybe silently excluded?
Artificially excluded, yeah.
Yeah, right. So, welcome to this special deep dive into unseen spaces, Designing for Liberation. I'm your host, and our mission today is to take a magnifying glass to the concrete and the grass all around you.
And I'm your resident expert for today's deep dive.
Yes, and we're going to explore how urban design, community governance, and participatory storytelling can actually actively dismantle systemic oppression.
It really is, it's a complete paradigm shift once you start looking at the built environment through this lens.
Oh, totally.
Because we're so conditioned to think of urban spaces as just background noise.
Yeah, like a neutral stage.
Exactly, a neutral stage where the play of our lives happens. But the scholars we're diving into today, they argue that these spaces are profoundly active participants.
Right.
They are literal physical manifestations of societal power dynamics.
Exactly. And to ground this, before we get into the heavy academic theory, I want to offer an analogy for you listening. Think of a city like an operating system on your smartphone.
Oh, I love this analogy.
Right. For centuries, the default settings of this urban OS were programmed by, and frankly for, one very specific type of user.
Mm-hmm.
The physical buttons of the city were placed exactly where that specific user could reach them. The features were optimized for their specific daily habits.
Right, and what we're looking at today is how communities around the world are, finally demanding access to the source code.
Yes, they're trying to rewrite those default settings so the operating system actually works for everyone else.
And that analogy holds up incredibly well when we look at the specific research on the table today. Because space, as these researchers point out, it functions as a classification system of hierarchies.
The concrete literally reinforces who matters.
Exactly, and who doesn't?
And we have a brilliant, just a truly global stack of research to guide us through this source code today. First, we'll be looking at an insightful 2025 analysis by Charmaine Levy and Sylvie Perret.
Right, looking at Montreal and Montevideo.
Yeah, examining the creation of explicitly feminist public squares in Canada and Uruguay. Then, we're going to travel to Italy, specifically Bologna, with a 2024 study by Levy, Alberio, and Placesi.
Focusing on urban commons, right?
Exactly, on urban commons and citizen participation. And finally, we have this fascinating 2026 paper by Yelian and Amankwa focusing on visual participatory storytelling.
With traditional weaving communities in northern Ghana.
Yes. So when you synthesize the core thesis uniting all three of these incredibly diverse papers, a very clear argument emerges.
It really does. True liberation in our urban and public spaces cannot be achieved just by changing the physical architecture.
Right, pouring new concrete isn't enough.
No, planting new trees, taking down a fence, it's not enough. Liberation requires a radical structural shift in who holds the power to design those spaces.
Right, and who is legally permitted to govern them.
Exactly, and who has the authority to tell the stories of those spaces.
Now, just as a quick note for you listening, as we dive into these highly political topics today, policing, housing rights, gender dynamics, Our goal here isn't to take a political stance.
Right, we're not endorsing one specific ideology over another.
Exactly. We're simply unpacking the arguments presented in these specific academic papers to help you understand how these scholars view the mechanics of urban space.
Impartial reporting on the concepts.
Exactly. So what does this all mean for you? It means the next time you go to a community zoning meeting or just take a walk through a public plaza, you're going to start seeing these invisible lines of power.
You won't be able to unsee them.
Right. So let's start by looking at this through a feminist and gender perspective, because we really need to address this idea of neutrality head on.
The myth of the neutral city.
Yes. And I'm going to push back right out of the gate here. When I walk down the street, I don't look at a sidewalk or a park bench and think, wow, that concrete is incredibly masculine.
Right.
So how exactly does a physical, inanimate object carry a gender bias?
Well, it's a fantastic question, because the bias is literally designed to be invisible to the people it serves.
Okay.
The literature tackles what scholars Delphi and Perales Blanco call the myth of the neutral city. Historically, the very concept of public space has been coded as masculine.
Really?
Yeah, and associated with the norm. Conversely, private space, like the home, the domestic sphere, has been coded as feminine, different, and marginal.
Okay, so when you look at a park bench,
The bench itself doesn't have a gender, right? But the placement of the bench, the lighting around the bench, the pathway leading to the bench, they were all designed based on the movement patterns of men.
okay. So it's about the historical concept of the public man versus the public woman.
Exactly.
Because if you think about it, a public man is like a politician, a business leader, a citizen participating in the town square.
Right, a figure of authority.
But as the researcher Delgado points out in the text, historically, a public woman carries a completely different connotation.
Often a very derogatory one.
Yeah, of being accessible to anyone. The language itself portrays how we view bodies in public space.
Precisely. And this leads directly to the concept of the standard citizen in urban planning.
The default user.
Right. According to geographer Leslie Kern, whose work from 2020 is heavily cited here, if you look at who the city's default settings were programmed for, that standard citizen is presumed to be a white, cisgender, heterosexual, healthy male.
Wow.
The infrastructure literally assumes that this user travels from the suburbs to the city center for work in the morning and returns in the evening.
It assumes a certain stride length, right?
A certain stride length, a certain physical strength, and an inherent physical safety.
So everyone else, women, gender-diverse individuals, people with disabilities.
They have to constantly negotiate their legitimacy just to exist in that space. Women, the studies note, often experience the city as an inherently hostile environment.
Marked by unwanted interactions and constant vigilance.
Exactly, an underlying sentiment of insecurity.
So the city isn't neutral, it's heavily curated.
Very curated.
Let's look at the concrete examples of how cities are actively trying to rewrite this source code. The Levy and Perret 2025 paper highlights two major interventions.
Place de Montreal in Montreal and Place de Pioneers in Montevideo.
Yeah, let's unpack Montreal first. They're building this massive urban project right over a motorway viaduct connecting Old Montreal to the city center. And what strikes me about this isn't just the architecture, it's what a viaduct actually represents. A viaduct is essentially a giant scar cutting through a city.
Right, usually prioritizing high-speed commuter traffic over local pedestrians.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
by capping it, they're literally healing an urban scar. But they take it a step further, right? A major element of this new space is an explicit homage to the victims of the Polytechnique femicide.
Yes, and the context of that decision is just vital for understanding the space. The researchers note that historically, women's contributions have been completely erased from the physical memory of the city.
Right. If you look at the statues in a typical city park,
Or the names of the major boulevards. They are almost exclusively dedicated to male military figures, politicians, or industrialists.
yeah, it's always guys on horses.
Exactly. So by dedicating a massive central infrastructural hub to the victims of femicide, Montreal is taking a space that could just be a neutral, forgettable walkway.
And using it to force a confrontation.
Exactly, a confrontation with the reality of gendered violence. It physically inserts the female experience, both the trauma and the resilience, into the daily commute of that standard citizen.
It's an undeniable physical presence. And we see a similar intention in Uruguay.
Yes, definitely. In Montevideo, the Place des Pionniers was established by a progressive city administration in 2017 to explicitly dedicate a public square to feminists.
And it's not just a plaque on a wall.
No, it's a spatial claim. The researchers argue that it becomes a space for the expression of new subjectivities.
Actively contesting that historical male appropriation of public space we were just talking about.
Right, opening up physical areas where collective human bonds can be built differently.
But, we shouldn't limit this conversation just to concrete squares or urban centers.
No, absolutely not. The gendered aspect of space, labor, and public visibility, it applies to traditional practices and rural environments, too.
Right, and this connects beautifully to the 2026 study from northern Ghana by Yelian and Amankwa.
They looked at how gendered labor plays out in the creation of textiles.
Specifically, the weaving traditions in the Loho community within the Wa municipality.
Right, and this is where we have to look beyond the final product and examine the invisible labor that creates the material culture of a space.
Which is so fascinating. The researchers point out that the arduous, meticulous preparation of the cotton threads.
The spinning, the sorting, determining the exact tension required for the loom.
Yeah, all of that is traditionally entirely women's labor.
Mm-hmm.
The men might operate the loom and weave the final pattern, which is the highly visible public part of the process.
But the foundational material is born from the unseen domestic sphere.
Exactly. Which raises an incredibly important question about what happens when those traditions face the pressures of modernization.
And globalized supply chains. The Ghana study notes that this traditional, highly labor-intensive thread preparation is slowly disappearing.
Because the weavers are increasingly turning to factory-made synthetic yarns.
And from an economic standpoint, you can understand why.
Right, they're cheaper, they're easier to acquire.
Vastly less laborious. But an elder weaver interviewed in the study explicitly notes that the locally spun Walala thread is physically heavier.
It has a completely different tactile quality.
Exactly.
I just love this detail. It's not just nostalgia, it's literally physics. When the gendered labor of thread preparation disappears, the physical reality, the drape, the weight of the resulting textile changes completely.
The cultural resonance changes.
Yeah. It's like a language losing its dialect.
Yeah.
The synthetic thread might look similar from a distance, but the localized matriarchal history woven into the very DNA of the fabric is overwritten.
Overwritten by industrialization, yeah. The story of the women who spun it is essentially erased from the final product.
Wow. The erasure of marginalized labor is just such a consistent theme, whether we're talking about textiles in Ghana or streetscapes in Canada.
It's everywhere. But let's bring our focus back to the physical infrastructure of the city and interrogate this idea of the standard citizen through a queer theory perspective.
Okay.
Because the researchers argue that the urban planning default doesn't just favor men, it enforces a strictly heteronormative use of space.
Okay, I want to make sure we don't just gloss over that term. What does a heteronormative use of space actually look like in practice?
Oh, drawing on Hancock's 2014 work, the Montreal and Montevideo study points out that the rules, the zoning regulations, and the very design principles of our cities,
Yeah.
they're inscribed with norms meant for very specific traditional family structures.
Oh, like suburban layouts designed entirely around the nuclear family unit.
Exactly. Or think about public spaces that criminalize loitering or non-commercial socializing.
Which disproportionately affects queer youth, right? Because they might not have safe domestic spaces to gather in.
Precisely. Anything that deviates from that traditional script is marginalized or literally designed out of the environment.
Which brings us to a specific architectural intervention at the Place des Montréalais in Montreal.
The public toilets.
Yes, the inclusion of universal, self-cleaning, non-gendered public toilets. Now, I have to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Go for it.
We hear about bathrooms endlessly in modern political debates. It dominates the news cycle, and honestly, to a lot of people, it can feel like a distraction from bigger issues.
Like housing or transit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So how does changing a bathroom literally change someone's right to the city?
It is the most crucial question you could ask, and the answer goes straight to the core of what it means to be a physical body in public.
Okay.
We have to look at the concept of the bodily experience of the city. If an urban space does not accommodate your fundamental biological necessities safely,
You simply cannot exist in that space.
right, not for any meaningful length of time, for queer, trans, or non-binary individuals, traditional gendered bathrooms are not just inconvenient,
They can be sites of severe anxiety.
or harassment, or outright violence.
I see. So if you know that you can't safely use a restroom downtown, Your radius of movement is strictly limited by your bladder.
Exactly. When a city fails to provide safe, non-gendered amenities, it is essentially issuing what we might call a biological eviction
A
notice.
biological eviction notice.
Yeah, unmet biological needs physically exile marginalized individuals from public life. You can build the most beautiful, progressive public square in the world.
But if certain people have to run back home after 2 hours because they can't safely use the facilities,
That square is not liberating, it is exclusionary.
so a universal self-cleaning, non-gendered toilet isn't just a plumbing upgrade or a political talking point.
No, it is a foundational infrastructural requirement for granting a basic human right to the city.
That completely shatters the idea that a bathroom is a trivial issue. It's not about culture wars.
It's about the literal, physical ability to leave your house and exist in public society for more than a few hours at a time.
It dictates whether you can attend a public protest, whether you can enjoy a festival, or just sit and read a book in the sun.
It absolutely dictates the terms of your citizenship in that space.
Man. Okay, so figuring out what people actually need to exist comfortably in these spaces, whether it's safe restrooms, better lighting, or specific cultural markers.
It requires us to fundamentally rethink how we gather knowledge.
Right, which transitions us into the migrant and racial justice perspective, and specifically the urgent need to decolonize the methodology of space making.
Let's pull from the Ghana weaving study again.
The Yelian and Amonkwa paper.
Yes, because their approach to this is brilliant. The researchers explicitly call out how traditional academic research, and by extension traditional urban planning,
Has often been deeply colonial in its execution.
it operates on a model of extraction. Historically, researchers or city planners or architects, they swoop into a community, extract data, and leave.
Right, they hand out surveys on clipboards or take photographs of weaving patterns.
And then they retreat to their offices to write their papers or draft their blueprints. The community never sees the benefit.
They rarely see the final data.
And they absolutely do not get a say in how their story is interpreted or told to the wider world. The researcher assumes the role of the ultimate authority.
Right, it's that attitude of, we know what's best for you based on the data we took from you.
It's incredibly patronizing.
Which is why the methodology used in the Ghana study, visual participatory storytelling, or VPS, is such a game changer.
They propose a rigorous 6-stage framework that entirely flips the script on who holds the interpretive authority.
I really want to spend some time walking through these 6 stages because, frankly, this should be required reading for anyone trying to design a community space.
Or a park, or a neighborhood plan anywhere in the world. I completely agree. Instead of the researcher acting as the objective expert who translates the community's experience.
The researcher acts merely as a facilitator for the community's own storytelling.
Exactly. So let's look at stage 1, community problem framing.
Okay, so the researchers don't show up with a pre-written hypothesis or a finalized blueprint.
No, they meet the people where they are. In this specific case, working in tandem with the Nabuk Foundation, they sat down with the Weavers and Loho and asked them what they felt was important to document.
They didn't say, we are here to study your thread tension.
Right, they asked what parts of your heritage are at risk of being lost.
That immediately shifts the power dynamic.
Completely. Then we move to stage 2, multimodal knowledge capture.
Okay, wait, what's multimodal?
It means it's not just handing out a standardized survey. It involves sketching, taking field photographs, recording audio of the looms.
Engaging in tactile observation of the spinning process.
Yes. It acknowledges that knowledge isn't just written down in academic English. It's embedded in muscle memory, in sounds, and in visual patterns.
Which leads directly into stage 3, initial creation.
Right. The researchers take all that multimodal capture and create preliminary visual representations.
But the key here, and I think this is where so many urban planners fail, is that these visuals are intentionally draft-like.
They are rough sketches.
Yeah, they're designed to be dialogue starters, not polished, unchangeable, finished products.
They aren't presenting a shiny 3D rendering of a park and saying, here's what we built for you.
They're presenting a rough sketch and saying, did we understand you correctly?
And that vulnerability from the researchers is what makes stage 4 community feedback actually function.
Because the visuals are jaffs, the community feels empowered to correct them.
And the corrections are where the magic happens.
Oh, absolutely. The researchers noted that the weavers would look at these sketches with the intense, hyper-specific expertise of lifelong practice.
They would catch subtle, incredibly important inaccuracies that an outsider would never notice.
There's this one detail from the source material that absolutely blew my mind. The researchers had sketched different traditional hats worn in the community.
Oh, the hat example is phenomenal.
Right. The master weaver looked at the sketches and explained that a chief's hat must sit high on the head because the chief answers only to the divine.
Hmm.
But the herald's hat, the messenger, must tilt forward because the herald leads the way and addresses the people.
To an outside observer, a hat is just a piece of fabric. But to the community, the exact angle of that hat is a complex social hierarchy
A religious belief.
and a historical narrative all embedded in visual design. If the researcher had just published their initial sketch without stage 4, they would have completely misrepresented the community's cultural reality.
Exactly. That's not just fashion. It's a structural language.
Which is why stage 5 iterative revision is the necessary follow-through. The community contextualizes the visuals, and the researchers revise them entirely based on that localized authority.
The community holds the pen.
Yes. Finally, we reach stage 6, community ownership and use.
Right. So the resulting visuals, the final documentation, they aren't locked away behind a paywall in some European academic journal.
No, they are exhibited locally in Ghana. They are used as teaching resources for the youth in the Wa municipality, and they are shared digitally by the community itself on their own terms.
So let's connect the dots back to urban space. If you apply this VPS methodology to migrant and racial justice in urban planning, it reveals a harsh truth.
You cannot simply build a brand new park in a diverse, historically marginalized neighborhood, slap a nice name on it, and assume you've done a good job.
Right, if you haven't given interpretive authority to the people currently living there.
If you haven't let them dictate the cultural symbols, the usage patterns, and the historical narrative of the space through a rigorous, iterative process.
You haven't liberated them, you've just enforced a softer, newer type of colonial architecture.
You've just updated the operating system, but you kept the same old default settings.
Right. But this brings up a massive thorny question. It sounds wonderful in theory to hand over authority to the community.
But who actually shows up to take it?
Yes. Who has the time, the resources, and the energy to engage in a 6-stage participatory design process?
That is the exact friction point where progressive theory meets the harsh reality of economics.
Okay, let's unpack this.
To understand this, we have to look at how class and socioeconomic status dictate who gets to participate in liberating design. And this is where the 2024 paper by Levy, Alberio, and Placesi detailing the Bologna case study becomes incredibly illuminating.
Let's travel to Italy. The researchers look at the landscape of Bologna in the aftermath of the 2007 and 2008 global financial crisis.
It's a familiar story for a lot of cities.
Yeah. Harsh austerity measures, budget cuts, and a plummeting trust in both local and national governments. People were feeling the intense squeeze of a faltering economy.
And in response to this crisis of faith, Bologna did something radical.
Right. They passed a landmark regulation in 2014 that officially allowed citizens to sign pacts of collaboration with the municipality.
This legal mechanism allowed everyday citizens to maintain and manage what they called urban commons.
Which could be anything, right? An abandoned historic building, an empty dirt lot, a neglected park.
Exactly. The intention behind the 2014 regulation was noble. It was designed to create a structural form of resistance against what scholar Gilles Pinson refers to as the neoliberal city.
Okay, let's unpack neoliberal city, because that's a term that gets thrown around a lot in political science. But what does it mean for the pavement under our feet?
In the context of urban planning, the neoliberal model treats the city primarily as a profit-making engine.
Okay.
Public spaces are commercialized. Every square inch of real estate is evaluated based on its ability to generate revenue.
And the urban common is the antithesis of that.
Exactly. An urban common is a resource, like a park or a community center, that is managed collectively by the citizens.
Prioritizing community well-being, shared use, and social cohesion over financial profit.
Right. But the reality on the ground in Bologna is vastly messier than the utopian ideal of the urban common.
Yeah, the researchers spent a lot of time analyzing the overwhelming tension of gentrification. They cite a 2016 concept by researcher Cupini describing the city center becoming musified for tourists.
Musification is a powerful concept. Imagine a vibrant city center like a snow globe.
Okay.
It looks beautiful, the historic facades are pristine, there are quaint cafes on every corner, but it is completely frozen in time and fundamentally unlivable for the people who actually work there.
Right. The affordable corner grocery store that sold fresh produce gets replaced by a boutique selling artisanal souvenirs.
The modest apartments where families lived for generations get bought up, renovated, and flipped into high-priced short-term rentals for vacationers.
The city is perfectly preserved for people passing through, which means the working-class locals are relentlessly pushed out to the invisible peripheries.
The city becomes a museum exhibit of itself.
And here is where we hit the most critical and perhaps most disappointing finding of the Bologna study.
The trap of institutionalization.
Yes. The 2014 regulation, empowering citizens to manage urban commons, sounds like a perfect defense against this musification.
But when the researchers looked at who was actually utilizing the regulation, a clear bias emerged.
The bureaucracy acts as a filter.
Exactly. The regulation inadvertently favors middle-class, well-resourced groups.
How so?
Well, to illustrate this, the researchers contrast two specific citizen groups operating in Bologna. First, they look at Layla Bologna.
Oh.
This is an association focused on the economy of sharing. It's essentially a cooperative tool-sharing library geared toward middle-class families.
So you can go there to borrow a power drill or a ladder instead of buying one.
Right. It's a fantastic project. It's ecological, it's highly organized, and crucially, it's polite.
Polite.
It doesn't threaten the foundational power structure of the city. As a result, the municipality is very comfortable signing a formal pact of collaboration with them.
Giving them legitimacy and access to space. It's the kind of project a mayor loves to take a photo in front of.
Exactly. But then you look at the other end of the spectrum. The researchers contrast the Tool Library with the Labos Collective.
And they are very different.
Very different. This is a much more antagonistic, militant, grassroots group. They weren't asking to share power drills. They were actively occupying abandoned spaces to fight for fundamental housing rights.
They were fighting for the marginalized people, the students and the migrants, who were being actively squeezed out of the city by that very gentrification and musification we just talked about.
Right. And the study notes that the city, even with this supposedly progressive 2014 regulation designed to empower citizens, tends to marginalize, ignore, or even actively repress these more militant groups.
Because the city doesn't want to sign a pact of collaboration with an anti-eviction occupation.
Exactly. Which exposes a profound limitation of the whole system. The institutionalization of the urban commons, the act of turning grassroots energy into municipal paperwork, inherently selects for moderate, non-threatening projects.
Because think about what it actually takes to sign a pact of collaboration.
You have to submit formal proposals.
You have to attend municipal meetings that are probably held at like 2:00 p.m. on a Tuesday.
You have to navigate legal jargon, liability insurance, and compliance codes.
Right. A middle-class tool-sharing group might have a lawyer, an architect, and a retired project manager on their board who have the free time and the specialized language skills to play the game.
A collective of working-class students and migrants fighting to avoid eviction doesn't have a lawyer on retainer.
And they certainly don't have free time on a Tuesday afternoon.
The process itself becomes a filter for privilege. The system selects for the standard citizen even when it is actively trying to be progressive.
It's a massive blind spot in urban planning.
It shows us that true inclusivity cannot just be a legal add-on or an open invitation. It has to be baked into the foundational mechanics of the space.
Which brings us perfectly to the final intersectional lens we need to apply to our source code today: ableism and disability justice.
Right, because if bureaucratic paperwork filters out marginalized people, physical design filters them out just as ruthlessly.
Let's go back to Uruguay, to the Plaza Pioneer, discussed in the 2025 Montreal and Montevideo study.
Okay.
When the researchers describe the physical design of this explicitly feminist square, they note something that really shouldn't be revolutionary, but sadly is. There are absolutely no stairs.
No stairs at all.
From the surrounding streets to the center of the plaza, the entire environment is 100% wheelchair accessible by default.
It is designed fundamentally from what anthropologist Setha Low, cited in the research, calls the bodily experience.
Okay, bodily experience versus what?
Well, the distinction between traditional planning and designing for the bodily experience is critical. In standard urban planning, accessibility is almost always treated as an accommodation.
Right.
The space is designed first and foremost for the able-bodied standard citizen, the person who can walk up a flight of concrete stairs without a second thought.
And then, as an afterthought to comply with building codes, a concrete ramp is zigzagged around the back entrance to accommodate someone in a wheelchair or someone pushing a stroller.
Exactly. The space clearly communicates who it belongs to and who is merely being tolerated.
Right. You are allowed to be here, but you have to use the side door.
But designing from the bodily experience completely upends that hierarchy. It means that varying physical oddities are not anomalies to be managed.
They are the foundational baseline for the blueprint.
The Place Pioneer doesn't assume an able body and then adjust. It assumes a diversity of bodies from the moment the architect touches pen to paper.
If there are no scares, no one is relegated to the back entrance. Everyone enters on the exact same terms.
It's the physical embodiment of removing the bureaucracy filter we saw in Bologna. It removes the friction of existence.
Man. Okay, we have pulled apart some incredibly complex threads today.
We really have.
We've looked at the myth of the neutral masculine city. We've explored the concept of the biological eviction notice.
We've walked through the rigorous methodology of decolonizing design in Ghana.
And we've examined the bureaucratic traps of the urban commons in Italy. I want to synthesize all of this.
Let's do it.
If we were to take all these disparate global lessons and actually build the ultimate space, let's call it the feminist park, how do we do it?
Okay.
What does the blueprint actually look like based on this stack of research?
It requires a synthesis of the best practices and the hard lessons from all three papers. If we are physically building the feminist park, the design principles must be heavily informed by the Levy and Perret analysis of Montreal and Montevideo.
The park must prioritize physical and psychological safety.
But, and this is a crucial caveat from the literature, it must do so without resorting to over-policing.
Right, because as the research points out, simply adding more security guards or police presence often actively harms the very marginalized groups that the park is supposed to protect.
Like queer youth or racialized individuals. The Montreal researchers noted that the Place des Montréalais is located in an area known for complex issues surrounding homelessness.
True security in the feminist park can't mean forcibly removing people who make the standard citizen uncomfortable.
It means designing a space that feels inherently welcoming and secure through environmental design.
Like excellent warm lighting.
Clear, open sightlines without hidden corners.
And as we discussed at length, universal, self-cleaning, non-gendered amenities, so nobody faces a biological eviction notice.
And of course, absolutely zero stairs. Environmental safety, not punitive safety.
Okay, so that's the physical design. What about the governance?
Then we must look to the Levy, Alberio, and Blachesi study of Bologna to establish the governance model. The feminist park cannot just be a gift handed down from a benevolent city council.
Because city councils change and budgets get slashed.
To truly resist the neoliberal pressures of gentrification, musification, and commercialization, the park must be legally recognized as an urban common.
However, learning from Bologna's mistakes, the pact of collaboration cannot be a bureaucratic labyrinth that only middle-class lawyers can navigate.
The governance structure must be intentionally designed to empower the most marginalized voices,
giving them a legal, undeniable stake in the park's maintenance and its future.
Exactly. But the most important step happens before any of that.
Before a single shovel hits the dirt.
Before the first architectural rendering is even drafted, the entire methodology must be driven by the Yelyan and Amankwa study in Ghana.
The city cannot just guess what the community needs. They cannot just send out a survey.
They have to employ frameworks like visual participatory storytelling. The community members themselves must hold the interpretive authority from day one.
They must dictate what cultural symbols are embedded in the pavement, what the historical narrative of the space is, and how the space is meant to be used.
That is the only way to ensure the source code of the city is actually rewritten. It's about moving away from a traditional model of mere consultation,
where the city asks for feedback on the finished design,
to a radical model of true co-creation. The community doesn't just review the blueprint, they hold the pen.
We have covered an immense amount of ground today.
A truly global tour.
Yeah, we've traveled from a massive concrete motorway viaduct in Montreal, reimagined as a profound monument to women,
to the complex, somewhat gentrified, polite tool-sharing libraries of Bologna.
All the way to the meticulous, hand-spun, physically heavy cotton threads holding the matriarchal history of Loho, Ghana. It is a journey that exposes the invisible wiring of the world around us.
And I hope it demonstrates clearly that space is never just empty space. The concrete is never neutral.
It is always an active reflection of our values, our histories, and our societal power structures.
Always.
I want to leave you, the listener, with a direct challenge today. Think about the public space closest to your home right now.
Maybe it's a neighborhood park, or an empty dirt lot behind a grocery store, or a bustling downtown plaza.
If you were handed the keys tomorrow and told you had the absolute authority to turn it into an urban common who is the very first person or group you would need to invite to the planning table.
Who is currently missing from the conversation in your community?
Because as we've learned today, if you don't actively intentionally invite them in, the space will automatically default back to the standard citizen.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, I want to build on the tension we uncovered in the Bologna study. We've seen that when cities institutionalize community spaces, they often unintentionally sanitize them. The bureaucratic system naturally favors polite, well-resourced, middle-class projects over the radical, messy, and absolutely necessary activism of groups fighting for basic survival.
Right.
So the ultimate challenge for a true feminist park isn't just making it physically safe and accessible with ramps and good lighting. It's ensuring that the space retains its power to challenge the status quo, even when the city is the one paying the light bill.
Wow.
This raises an important, lingering question. Can a space truly be liberating if it requires a permit from the establishment?
That is a phenomenal, unsettling question to chew on as you walk through your city tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. I hope it helps you look closer at the unseen lines of power in your own neighborhoods. Keep learning, keep questioning those default settings, and keep redesigning your world. We'll catch you next time. This knowledge is a tool, really. A tool for seeing your city differently, and potentially for helping to change it.
It's been a really insightful deep dive, I think. This document provides such a vital framework, especially for projects like the Feminist Park Project that are trying to build something fundamentally different. It shows just how interlinked urban design and social justice are.
It really does. But it also shows the scale of the challenge, right? It requires sustained effort, real commitment, and a genuine willingness to shift power dynamics in how cities get made and managed.
Definitely. It makes you think about how we ensure those voices, the ones that have been excluded, are actually heard and centered.
There's another quote from Sarah Ahmed that feels relevant here.
Go on.
She says, "If you have to shout to be heard, you are heard as shouting."
That's powerful.
It makes you ponder, doesn't it? How can the design of public space itself work differently? How can it amplify the voices of those who've been historically silenced, ensuring their needs are met without them having to shout just to be noticed?
How can design itself listen? That's a really provocative thought to end on.
A lot to think about.
Indeed. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.